What is up, and welcome to another edition of 40-Minute Debates, where two parties will argue the most triggering social and political issues in 40 minutes or less. My name is Tyler Bluntman, and I am going to be your host today. Now, today's topic, did the party switch really happen? So let's introduce our contenders. Advocating in favor of the party switch is Shashaank, also known as Shashaank Videos on TikTok. What's up, man?
What's up?
Hey, first timer. He's a first timer on the show.
Yeah.
All right, coming back for round two is Topher. He is arguing against the party switch, and he also goes by TopherTownMusic on TikTok. What's up, Toph?
What it do, man?
What's up, man? All right, so viewers watching this will be able to vote on who they believe won on our Instagram page at 40-Minute Debates. Now, remember, the person that wins isn't necessarily the person who you agree with the most, but the person who made you think the most. The person will only be open for 24 hours after this video airs, so make sure that you vote quickly. And let me tell you guys how this is going to break down. Each of you will get 3 minutes to present your opening statements. After this, we will have 6 rounds of rebuttals, 5 minutes each. During each rebuttal, one person will lead the conversation as they see fit. When it's your time, you can ask your opponent questions, address their stance, or forfeit any remaining time that you may not wish to use. The debate will then conclude with a 2-minute closing statement from each of you. Do either of you have any questions before we get started?
Negative.
Nope.
All right. We did flip a coin off air, and Shashaank won, and he wants Topher to go first. So, Topher, you have up to 3 minutes for your opening statement. Go ahead and get started whenever you're ready.
Cool. It's pretty simple. So Shashaank has the burden of proof to prove that the party switched. And the issue I think we're going to have here is, what does switch mean? I mean, because we got to define what a switch is. Like, switch can be changed. I can switch a direction. But I think the overall meaning of the party switched is they flopped. So Republicans became Democrats and Democrats became Republicans. Now, if you can prove to me that all those policies and everything in that direction or in that vicinity changed, okay. But I doubt you're going to be able to do that given what's going on currently. So the burden of proof is on you. And that's my opening statement.
Okay, man, that was the shortest opening statement we've ever had, but that's all good, man, all good.
Fair enough.
All right, Shashaank, you have up to 3 minutes. You have a prepared statement, right?
Yeah.
That's all good, man, all good. So you have up to 3 minutes. Go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Okay. Hey, everyone. My name's Shashaank, and today I'm going to be arguing for the existence of a party switch, or rather a party evolution. Throughout the course of the debate, I'll be addressing 3 broad topics: the history and formation of the Democratic and Republican parties, the ideological shifts within each party, and the arguments proposed by party switch deniers. Before I get into those points, I want to make something clear. It is clear that the Democratic Party was the party of racism during the time of slavery and continued to be the party of racism well into the 20th century. Today, the words Democrats and Republicans have become synonymous with the words liberals and conservatives, respectively. However, throughout American history, and specifically the 20th century, this was far from the case. Democrats and Republicans were mainly split on economic policy, where the Democrats were liberal and the Republicans were conservative. Socially, it was a much blurrier line, unlike today. There were socially liberal and conservative Democrats and socially liberal and conservative Republicans. People's ideologies were much more dependent on the region in which they lived than the party that they belonged to. Southerners, Democrats and Republicans alike, tended to be opposed to civil rights. Also keep in mind that every piece of civil rights legislation was passed through Democratic Congresses and signed by Democratic presidents, albeit with Northern Republican support. Many people fail to realize these facts and end up comparing the Democratic Party of 2020 to the Democratic Party of 1865, using claims such as the Democrats were the party of slavery and founded the KKK. These arguments are unfounded and are simply based off of the idea that the two parties have the same name, nothing more. The word Democrat has no connection with the word liberal, and the word Republican has no connection with the word conservative. That just happens to be the case today. Therefore, it's stupid to compare parties 200 years apart just because they have the same name. It's unequivocally clear that both the Democrat and Republican parties evolved ideologically and regionally, and in many cases completely switched sides. There are 4 periods throughout American history where political realignment has occurred. These periods sparked an ideological shift in the parties, but more importantly, they sparked a regional one, and this is where the party switch is truly evident. The first realignment period started in 1860 when Abraham Lincoln was elected. The electorate shifted greatly between the North and the South, as many Southerners were very pro-slavery and upset about how Lincoln won the election without winning a single Southern state. The second realignment period was in 1896 when William McKinley was elected. The electorate shifted based off the industrial versus agricultural issue. The third period was during the Great Depression. Depression, where FDR cemented the Democratic Party's ideological shift from being the party of small government to that of big government. The fourth period started in 1964, where there was a realignment on the issue of civil rights and Southern strategy. I would also say that the passing of Roe v. Wade in 1974 was instrumental in getting evangelicals in the South to start voting Republican. I'm sure Topher will dispute some of these claims, and I will provide more reasons and historical evidence to show why these realignments happened, and more broadly, why and how the party switch happened.
All right. Cool. All right, Toph, you are going to have your first minute 5 rebuttal. This is your time. Use it as you see fit. Go ahead and get started whenever you're ready.
Cool. Okay, so Shashaank, you said that the only realignments happened around, I think the last one you said was 1970s, right?
Around like 1950s, 1960s.
Okay, well.
Around the civil rights time, yeah.
Well, I'm just going to say it was actually later than that. And I'm going to say around the 1990s/80s. I just
that whole 40-year period, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to say that. Now, we talked about when the party started. I'm going to go ahead and say off the bat. Shashaank, has a Republican ever owned a slave?
There have been 9 cases of them, according to historians, yes.
Which Republican?
I'm not sure of the names, but I was reading a historian from Princeton cites 9 different Republicans around the time of slavery that owned slaves.
So when did the Republican Party form?
The Republican Party formed basically, so around the time of the Jacksonian Democrats, it was the Whigs and the Democrats, and then it moved to the Free Soil Party, and then it became the Republican Party. The most prominent Republican, obviously, being Abraham Lincoln.
No, I mean when did the party form?
I'm not sure of the exact year, but the Democrats are the oldest party.
Yeah, it was 1864. I mean 1854. Okay. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
So right before. Wait. Did I say that right? 1854. I think 1854. Right before the Civil War. No, 1860. Whatever.
Right before the Civil War. I got you. Yeah.
But now Republicans own slaves.
Okay.
How many Democrats own slaves?
Oh, many Democrats. I'm not denying that.
So why did the Republican Party form?
Basically in retaliation to the pro-slavery views of the Democratic Party, and they were just upset with, and it was just they were much more socially liberal at the time than the Democratic Party was. And I admitted in my opening statement that the Democratic Party was the party of racism in the 1860s. They were. I'm not denying that.
Right. I'm just going through it. We got to go back through that, right?
Right.
You can say something, then you still got to prove it. So we're going to go back through it.
Right.
And the reason I asked that, it was around the Nebraska-Kansas Act, right?
Yes.
When they formed the whole party.
The Kansas-Nebraska Act, which expanded slavery, basically you could have as many slaves as possible. Anywhere in the Republican Party was opposed to this.
Right, and they were opposed to expanding slavery westward, right?
Yes.
Western colonies. So what I'm asking is, from the foundation of being a Republican of the Republican Party, we've already been pro-civil rights, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So I'm guessing you're going to prove that we've been anti-civil rights.
Not necessarily, no.
So were the Democrats at the beginning pro-civil rights?
No.
So are you going to prove they're pro-civil rights today?
Yes.
So you're going to prove a switch that who switched? That the Democrats switched because Republicans.
2 minutes.
Because Republicans, based on what you just said, never switched. They've been pro-civil rights to pro-civil rights today. From the beginning.
So up until the Civil Rights Act, it was much more of a regional vote than it was a party-based vote. A majority of Democrats, Northern Democrats, supported the Civil Rights Act, and a majority of Northern Republicans supported the Civil Rights Act. 94% of Northern Democrats in this House voted for the Civil Rights Act, and 85% of Northern Republicans voted for the Civil Rights Act. But 7% of Southern Democrats voted yes, and 0% of Southern Republicans voted yes.
Okay, I'm gonna get you on this then. Which one was anti-guns for black people? Which party?
It was the Democratic Party, but Ronald Reagan was a massive gun grabber in the 1980s.
I didn't ask that. I said which party? When it first came out, slaves were freed. The reason why
the Democratic Party.
Reason why Republicans pushed the 14th Amendment to get citizenship, right? And so they can arm themselves.
Yes.
So which party is very anti-gun today?
The Democratic Party.
So they have the same stance they had from back then.
But it's for completely different reasons.
No, not for different reasons. It's going to majorly disproportionately affect black people, right? We can go back to when
the Democrats have a different view.
We can go back to when the Panthers was in California. Who passed that legislation?
30 seconds.
I'm not.
Democrats.
I'm not entirely sure.
Democrats.
Okay.
So once again, pro-civil rights is still Republican Party, and Democrats are still anti-civil rights, specifically for Black people, based on that statement.
Because of gun control?
Yes, absolutely.
But why is it that
Frederick Douglass said a man's rights rest in 3 boxes: jury box, ballot box, and ammo box. So if you take away my right to defend my rights, what do I have then?
Time. Okay. All right. Shashaank, we are going to switch it over to you. And let me reset this for you. All right, 5 minutes. And Shashaank, this is your time, so use it as you see fit, man.
Okay. So you bring the point up about gun control, right? I wouldn't say that the Democratic Party as a whole is anti Second Amendment. There are obviously Democrats like Beto O'Rourke who said, "Oh, we're gonna grab your AR-15s." But I personally am not for banning any guns existing today, and I'm a Democrat. But I'm not for expanding more and allowing nuclear weapons and stuff like that and bombs for civilians. But the thing I'm for in terms of gun control is like universal background checks and preventing bad people from getting guns. So I think Democrats view gun control in a sense as a solution to the issues that plague the Black community. I don't think it's for the same reason as it was when it was initially a racist motive, as you described. That's true. And I'm not denying that the Democrats were the party of racism initially. But the Democrats today are not for gun control because they want to take guns away from Black people. They want to take guns away from bad people. That's their whole view of it. And you may disagree with that, and you may think that giving everybody guns is a better solution to the issue that we have with mass shootings and school shootings. But the Democratic Party has a different view on it. I don't think it's necessarily a racist view. But when it comes to civil rights and the party switching, the main argument that a lot of people bring up is, only out of the 20 senators that voted Republican, the only senator that switched was Strom Thurmond, and there was only one, right? But you have to realize that at the time, like I said, it's a much more regional vote. In general, Southern Democrats and Republicans alike were against civil rights. They were mostly segregationist and racist. It didn't have anything to do with their political beliefs because the split between the Democratic and the Republican parties in the 1900s was mainly an economic split in terms of big government versus small government. The line was much blurrier in terms of civil rights. And as late as 1962, the general public perceived, like 56% of the general public believed that there was pretty much no difference in the Democrats and Republicans' views on civil rights. But by 1964, I'm going to get this statistic. By 1964, 60% of respondents said that the Democratic Party was more in favor for fair treatment and jobs for Blacks. So after the Civil Rights Act, the public began to perceive the Democrats as more socially liberal than the Republicans were. And a lot of people bring up the whole Strom Thurmond thing, but that's looking at the higher level. When you're a senator, if you switch parties, you're going to lose a lot of your privileges. The reason Strom Thurmond was able to switch seamlessly is because of the fact that the Republican Party guaranteed him all of his privileges and powers that he had as a senator. So it was an easy switch for him. But let's look at lower level. Let's look at the House, right? You have William C. Kramer from Florida, who switched in 1949, won in 1954, voted against the Civil Rights Act. Edward Gurney from Florida, who switched in 1962, voted against the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. You had Dave Treen from Louisiana, who switched in 1962, Iris Fairclough Blitch who switched in 1964, and campaigned for Barry Goldwater. James D. Martin from Alabama, who switched in 1962, won in 1964, and these are people switching from Democrat to Republican in the House of Representatives. Bill Dickinson, Bo Calloway.
2 minutes.
And then there was also another senator, Albert Watson, who backed Barry Goldwater, and he was alongside Strom Thurmond in Alabama. He got stripped of his powers, so he was forced to and he didn't switch from Democrat to Republican at the time. So he was stripped of his powers because he backed a Republican candidate. He basically got resigned and then switched to Republicans and got reelected to the House later. Then you have Jesse Helms, who initially started running as a Republican senator. Running as a Republican. However, in 1950, he helped a Democrat, Willis Smith, run a campaign on an extremely racist platform. So these are just examples of people in Congress switching. But if you go even lower, there are examples of governors, like in Virginia, Mills Goodwin, a segregationist Democrat, switched parties and won re-election as a Republican in 1973. Then even in state legislatures, you have South Carolina, a representative in South Carolina, Arthur Ravenel Jr., a representative in South Carolina, Floyd Spence, a Texas representative, Jack Cox, a Mississippi senator, Stanford Morse, Alabama representative, Albert Goldthwait, Louisiana Representative Roderick Miller, and South Carolina Senator Marshall Parker. So obviously the Civil Rights Act was just the beginning of this, and it took a long time. But many people have this misconception that Southern strategy was just an appeal to racism. It was much more than that, and it took a long time for the Republican Party to fine-tune their pitch to Southern voters. And I think that's why Roe v. Wade was so instrumental, because the Republican Party not only started appealing to sort of the racist whites indirectly with Southern strategy, they also started appealing to Christians, and it started making this claim that Democrats were not Christian, were anti-Christian. So that's what their whole position on being pro-life, in terms of also smaller government, things like that. So over time, it took a long time for this switch to happen, but it's clear that the Civil Rights Act actually cemented this switch, and Democrats did start switching to the Republican Party. It's this misconception that they didn't.
Okay. I'm assuming that's it. So you only had like 4 seconds left anyway. So, okay, cool. Yeah. All right, cool. So, Topher, I have reset the time, and you are good to go. 5 minutes. Go ahead and start.
Okay. Once again, you named just certain senators, and you're diminishing the fact that the Southern strategy wasn't effective by saying that it took a long time to take place, right? That's what you're trying to say. You're saying, because to me, if someone implements a strategy, which they only used during that time, they didn't continue to use the Southern strategy throughout the years, throughout the decades.
I disagree.
Okay, why would you disagree?
Because Ronald Reagan, when he campaigned in 1980, said that he was for states' rights, and the Southern strategy came back up. It was people say that it's just Barry Goldwater and Richard Nixon that was a Southern strategy, and people also say that it started in 1964. It didn't. It was, people started talking about it in like 1962. So the whole idea of the Southern strategy was for the Republican Party. They started realizing that there were cracks in the so-called Deep South that the Democrats had for so long, and they started slowly appealing to that, not just with racism.
So you're saying Southern strategy was simply about state rights for Ronald Reagan? That was part of the.
That was part of it. Yes, it was part of smaller federal.
So what else did Ronald Reagan appeal to and use part of the Southern strategy? Because you do know he won pretty much the entire United States, right?
Yes.
So what appeal did he have for the entire United States? Was the entire United States all of a sudden Southern strategies and racism?
No, but this was after Jimmy Carter basically had one of the worst economies in American history because of stagflation, and it basically we were in a terrible oil crisis. So in terms of, Jimmy Carter was a Democrat, so people just overwhelmingly voted for Ronald Reagan because Jimmy Carter was perceived as being such a terrible president. So you have to look at context. So
let me ask you this. If the Southern strategy didn't work, it did work. When Nixon implemented it, why did he lose the South when he won the first time around?
Which year was this?
1969.
1969? Okay. Do you want to tell me who won the South in 1969?
Who Nixon? Against Nixon didn't win. When he won the presidency,
yes,
he didn't win the South.
Who won the South? Who won the Deep South states?
I don't know, whoever he was running against.
It wasn't. It wasn't the Democratic candidate. It was an independent, George Wallace, who won all of the Deep South states, and he was known for being a staunch segregationist. And that's the most recent time in which a third-party candidate has gotten electoral votes. So it actually wasn't the Democratic candidate. It was an independent candidate who was an insanely racist segregationist who won the southern states. That's the reason Nixon didn't win them.
Fair enough. It's my time. Fair enough. Okay. So why did Jimmy Carter win the entire South right after Nixon?
Because Nixon the whole Watergate situation was mired in corruption, and that Jimmy Carter was from the South, a peanut farmer, a family man, and perceived as a Christian. So all of a sudden
you're saying the Southerners voted for him not because he was a racist, because of his values.
Because they were very religious. I mean, the evangelicals in the South.
I'm asking. So you're saying because of his values?
Yes. Because he's from the South.
So all of a sudden you're saying the Southern they voted on values. Is that what you're trying to say? It wasn't because they were racist. They voted for him because of his values.
Southerners vote on a myriad of different issues. It's not just racism, and I wouldn't say that the South is it's just only racism.
Okay.
It's also a lot of evangelicals.
Tell me what those values were then.
A big thing on family, a big thing on religion. Many of them are heavily Christian. And also keep in mind, Jimmy Carter was from he was a peanut farmer. He was from Georgia, from the South. And this was after the Republican Party with Richard Nixon had been caught in doing Watergate. So the entire public was pretty much just heavily
disappointed in the entire public because he didn't win the North like that. It was just the South. So what I'm going to say is, Well, you just mentioned to me is my whole thing, right? You just proven to why the party's in the switch. You just said they voted on values. What value? Those same values Republicans have today, which is what? Pro-faith, pro-life, right?
Okay, yes.
And all
Well,
those things.
I'm not
Limited
saying
government.
Fair enough, yes. But
Yep.
I'm not saying that the Republican Party today is the party of racism, quote unquote. I'm just saying that there was a switch in there was an ideological shift between the parties. I'm not trying to argue for the fact that the Republicans just became super racist and they vote, and that's why
30
this
seconds.
happened. But generally, the racists were concentrated in the South. So a more racist candidate would have appealed to Southern voters better. When it came to the Jimmy Carter election, it wasn't necessarily true that the Republican he was running against was a racist or a segregationist.
Okay. All right. So all I'm saying is this. I just want to clear the air because we were talking about races and everything. I'm saying the parties never switch. Democrats are still the same Democrats before. They're just doing it more implicitly in the open ways, which I mentioned earlier about the gun control.
Okay.
What you have told me now, you haven't told me anything. Okay. That time?
Oh.
Yeah, time. We're going to go to Shashaank. 5 minutes on the clock. Go ahead and get started.
Okay, so far we've only been looking at like sort of social issues in a sense, but would you agree that there's been a somewhat of a shift in economic ideologies from big government to small government?
Yeah, I mean, I can admit that.
So that's a pretty big party switch, right? So many people, when they talk about the party switch,
I won't say that's big. We can say that's one
that's
thing.
Important.
I mean,
the main split between the two parties across the 1900s was basically just economic ideology. Both parties, the line in terms of civil rights was extremely blurry, and a lot of candidates, Democrat and Republican alike, refused to really talk about civil rights. So neither party you can say was a civil rights supporting party across the 1900s.
I told you why it was, and you just said it wasn't.
Why? What?
Literally, the Republican Party is founded on civil rights. You agreed to this earlier. We talked about
the Republican Party was founded on containing slavery, not founded on civil rights. Since when did the Republican Party of the 1860s want voting rights for blacks, free?
Because that's why
equality.
It was going.
They just wanted to contain slavery. Even Abraham Lincoln didn't initially intend to abolish slavery. He just wanted to contain it in the South and just felt like, eventually it'll just go away. He didn't want it to expand.
Once again, he quoted saying, if I could keep the Union together and not free the slaves, I would. If I could free the slaves and keep the Union together, I would. Which one did he end up doing? We could say what he said, but which one did we end up doing? We ended up fighting for it, right?
But it took 100 years after that for the Civil Rights Act to get passed, and there was plenty of Republican presidents. So why isn't that the Civil Rights Act?
Let him control his time, man.
Oh, okay.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, talking time.
If he's cool with it, then go ahead.
Yeah.
Moderator, chill out. So I was gonna say Republicans were the first ones to pass civil rights act, man. I mean, like I said.
In the 1960s? Okay, so
I ain't talking about the 1960s. I'm talking about right out the gate, 13th, 14th Amendment. And then you're going up to 1957, right?
There was a Civil Rights Act in 1960.
Yeah, 1957, 1960.
Okay, sure.
Who was president?
In 1957, I'm not entirely sure who was it.
Around the time of Eisenhower, and that's when he sent the National Guard in to Little Rock, Arkansas, right?
Yes, because of major pressures. Yeah.
Yeah, it was fighting against segregation and integration going on during that time.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, like you're saying, like as if the Democrats were the main ones pushing that at the time. What I'm saying
No.
What I'm saying is Republicans from the start, because we kept going. You haven't mentioned any Democrat that started civil rights until the late '60s. Republicans have always been pro civil rights.
Right. Okay. So that's not the
2 minutes.
It's not necessarily true. Like, I'm not saying that Republicans don't get any credit at all, but if you look at the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Fair Housing Act, and the 24th Amendment, which removed the poll tax, every single one of those things was passed through a Democratic Congress with a Democratic president, but obviously with the help of Northern Republicans. But Southern Democrats and Southern Republicans were profusely opposed to these things. They really, really hated civil rights. So it's not as if the Republican Party and the Democratic Party all were like, civil rights is all rosy. It was Northerners believed in civil rights and Southerners did not. This isn't an issue between Republican and Democrat. It's an issue between North and South. So whoever could, like, would you agree that there wasn't a massive demographic shift in the South from 1960 to now?
It depends what you're talking about. I mean, a lot of black people came back down south.
But was there a humongous shift?
So a lot of black people came back down south. What does that say about voting and everything else?
Yes, that's why the South is getting more liberal. Georgia has been getting more and more blue as more immigrants come into Atlanta. Atlanta's a big
you said immigrants.
As more African Americans are coming to the South and these southern cities, you would agree that 80% of African Americans vote blue.
Yeah, and why do we vote blue?
Because Democrats have been, well, they actually started around the New Deal.
It did.
So like around FDR's New Deal, about I think 76% of blacks started supporting the Democratic Party.
30 seconds.
So from then they were just for it. But if you look at the 1970s, the segregationist senators were the Republicans. When Joe Biden gets criticized for being against federally mandated busing, they say, oh, he collaborated with these senators who are segregationists. All of those senators were Republican. So, I mean, like, it's very clear that there was a shift and people moved from the Democrat to the Republican Party because they were upset about civil rights. But Southern strategy and all this stuff is much more than about racism. It's about an overall shift in ideology and getting the South to start voting Republican when there wasn't a major Democratic shift.
All right.
Or demographic shift, my bad.
Topher, this is your last 5-minute rebuttal. Control it as you see fit.
Cool. So Shashaank, we're gonna continue on what you was talking about, man.
Sure.
So what I'm trying to get here, man, is what are you arguing now? I mean, because the whole thing is about did the party switch and like relevant today, right? So
yes.
What can you tell me that's relevant to today that the parties actually switched?
The ideology is just completely different.
Because right now you're telling me that it's just based on regional locations anyway. So
right, but the regional location in which a ton of racists were located and a ton of very conservative anti-civil rights people were located is now controlled by the Republican Party. Why? It's not as if they suddenly just, the whole demographic of the South changed. Their values have remained constant, and those values represented hating civil rights. So, in an essence, right? So now those values are embedded in voting for the Republican Party.
But I'm asking you, so what policies are we pushing in the South as Republicans that's not discriminatory but anti-civil rights?
Okay, so first of all, the whole war on crime, war on drugs, being extremely tough on crime, we can agree that has disproportionately affected blacks, right?
But that was passed by the 1994 crime bill as well. So
yes, that was passed by the 1994 crime bill, but that was a political move because in 1988, the Democratic challenger to George H.W. Bush lost because he was seen as weak on crime. The general public believed that being tough on crime was better. So what happened in the 1994 crime bill? It was a move by the Democrats as a political move to try to get more people to vote for them. But the main reason why the crime really went up was not because of the crime bill, because not as many states adopted some of the extremely harsh provisions in the crime bill. It was because of individual states establishing policies and laws that made it extremely tough, mandatory minimum sentencing, stuff like that.
Yeah. So a lot of black people was for that, right? Tough on crime.
Yeah, I'm aware. That's why I defend Joe Biden for the crime bill.
Well, I don't defend him for it because I still think it was a stupid idea. But I'm just saying,
it's a terrible idea. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just saying, that's not against civil rights. Like, they wanted this. They wanted more government. So what I'm saying is, you still haven't named the policy besides what policies. I mean, because I'm gonna name it out right now, right? So, civil rights. We talk about abortion, pro-life, and pro-choice. We believe that every life has rights, right?
Yes.
Would you believe that? Would you agree to that?
The abortion debate is entirely
no. It's not an abortion debate. I'm just asking a question. Do you believe every life has rights?
Every person
America has rights.
Yes. Right? Yes.
Okay, cool. So what we're trying to do is actually continue those rights that we had before the whole Roe versus Wade, and that's a Southern thing. And there's no color to it. We're not saying that black people don't get the same amount of rights. We're not saying white people. We're saying that unborn babies have rights. Do you believe that's very pro civil rights? Would you agree to that?
Sorry?
Would you agree that's very pro civil rights?
That unborn babies have rights?
Yes.
Like being pro-life? It's very pro-evangelical. Yes,
No,
not necessarily pro-civil rights.
That's definitely pro-civil rights. So I'm going to ask you this. If black people are disproportionately being killed by that, would you have an issue with that? Is that not discriminatory behavior?
Absolutely, but that's not because of Democrats. That's because of institutional racism that
No,
has
it's
existed.
not because of institutional racism.
If we made the majority of reason that people have an abortion is because of financial concerns.
No,
so if
25% of the reasons, 25% of the reason, majority of the reasons.
What is the biggest inconvenience?
They just don't want to have the baby.
Yes, but that's because many times teenage pregnancies, stuff like that.
They don't want to have the baby, so that has nothing to do. Majority of the reasons have nothing to do with that. So
but
I'm going to go back to what I'm saying. Like the policy,
let him talk. He's got
the policy we have is a Great Society, right? The Great Society Act was passed by who? Democrats.
B. Johnson.
Right, Lyndon B. Johnson.
Yes.
One of the most horrible things that could have happened to the black community, because you know what happened during that time, right?
What happened?
So when they passed the bills and we came to welfare and everything else that happened, we was once again disproportionately targeted based on these things. So the government actually sunk, because it started in New York, which was ran by a Democratic mayor and governor, by the way. But they sent people to the houses to do welfare checks. And if the father was found to be in a home, then they would lose benefits. So a lot of people that stayed, a lot of black people that stayed with people, and we got to think about this, because of the minimum wage that was pushed back in the 1930s during the New Deal, that disproportionately affected black people because we lost a bunch of different jobs. I think it was like 500,000 jobs at the time. So a lot of black people was out of work. And we got to think about the whole big government also got rid of a lot of the farm and development and everything. A lot of black people were low wage workers and all that stuff. So we just didn't have jobs. So when they started for the welfare checks, black people and black fathers couldn't be with their kids. So, but the time up.
All right.
Okay. Well,
Shashaank, hold on. Let me reset this. All right. This is your last 5 minutes.
Okay, so I would disagree with the premise that the Great Society was like a horrible piece of racist legislation that hurt blacks. It was a sweeping legislation that helped a lot of communities. Additionally, like let's think about
what communities, because Democratic controlled cities like Detroit, Chicago, horrible. So
yes, but do you realize that state and local governments don't have nearly as much power without federal policies coming down? How much can you accomplish if you don't have things like universal health? Like universal health care is a nationwide thing that you have to accomplish.
And the states that have tried it have failed and got rid of it. And those are Democrat states.
Yes, because the deficit spending is a completely different thing economically at a state level than it is at a federal level. So when you say that Medicare for all didn't work in Vermont, that does not mean that Medicare for all will not work in the United States. That's a whole different ballgame because of state deficit spending and state trade and stuff like that, and debt works very differently on a state level than a federal level. So it's entirely different. But if we want to look at policy, like Lee Atwater, when he was asked about Southern strategy, he outright said that we are not going to directly appeal to racism. We're going to say, oh, smaller government, lower taxes, all these things that and he said disproportionately hurt African Americans, right? And he said that's going to be the way to get the South, because he realized that the South was more racist than the rest of the country. So Lee Atwater directly alluded to the Southern strategy and outright said these indirect policies that Ronald Reagan was promoting. Ronald Reagan was the reason that the social safety net is so screwed up today. It would be so much better if his policies didn't completely just ruin the entire social safety net. If Democrats are advocating for policies like universal health care, environmental regulations, that's a huge thing. Republicans are not for environmental regulations, doing nothing about the Flint, Michigan water crisis, doing nothing about climate change. All of those things disproportionately affect people in poorer neighborhoods, and those people are more often than not African Americans. Even universal health care, this sort of thing.
Well, the reason why, once again, that's big government. And we already know, I mean, slavery, if we don't have 200 years of slavery to prove that the government should not be trusted, I don't know what to tell you. And that's what I'm saying. You keep trying to get us to get into big government. And this is one of the reasons why I'm a Republican, because I understand that the government is corrupt. You know, I work for the government. I've been intel analyst for the military. I've read all the top secret things. I know about the false flag events. And I'm telling you now, you don't want to trust the government. So a lot of times what the Democrats want to do is they want to pretend to help people. And this is where the white liberal complex come in, right? They just want to make it seem like they're helping us out. They don't want to really give us control of our own destiny. And that's why I truly appreciate Republicans. Because we can go back and talk about Frederick Douglass. We can go back and talk about when he was a Republican. The whole reason he was a Republican is because we want to do ourselves. He said, hey, do not help us. If the black man fails, so be it. I don't care. But I want the opportunity to control my destiny and do what we can to do it for ourselves. The Democrats have continuously robbed us of that opportunity. Once again, they keep trying to take and pass gun control laws. And we already know that based on stereotypes and how propaganda is, African American people are viewed as more dangerous and harmful. Therefore, with red flag laws, we're probably going to be called more often to have our guns taken away. And we can say that. I can say that with all earnest, man. And we were talking about being dependent on the government. That's why I didn't like the New Deal. Minimum wage knocked us out because we was doing really good. That's why I'm all pro free market, because free market at the time, if you go back and look at that time, wages for people that was on the road doing theater shows were going up. Actually, that was actually higher than the minimum wage. But when the minimum wage came and slapped down, it empowered racists. And all these policies you keep talking about, they keep empowering true racists. Like, I don't want the government like, hey, leave me alone, leave my guns alone, stop hurting my people. And we don't need their help. And yes, you're talking about Republicans. We care about climate change. We're just not running around talking about it's an existential crisis.
There's a minute left.
Oh, okay.
But those specific policies that in terms of climate change, when you're reversing them, like Donald Trump has reversed them, he's done things to increase fracking and removing oil regulations and removing fossil fuel regulations. That disproportionately affects African Americans in terms of environmental regulations. And you were talking about the minimum wage. Okay, so that's a whole different economic thing. But if you look at the length of recessions and things like that from the free market era and the Keynesian era between like around 1945, the Keynesian era had much shorter recessions and much longer periods of economic growth. And the thing is, in terms of this whole free market belief, it's too simplistic for how society works. You cannot just operate economics based off of simply just supply and demand, because in a labor market, right? People who are in a labor market, the companies have much more power today than workers do. So they're able to inflate wage, and they're able to hire people for lower jobs because the workers don't have any other options. So that's a whole different argument.
All right. Okay. All right. So we're gonna go into our closing statements. Topher, you're gonna be first.
Wow.
It's time already, man. But you can wrap anything up that you need to in your 2-minute closing statement. So go ahead and get started whenever you're ready.
Okay, so all right, guys, I just want to put this out here. So I still haven't heard how the party switched. All we talked about was some things that regional, for the main part, we agreed that regional policies and people voted based on that. But we still haven't talked how the parties really switched. I've proven that some of the same policies that Democrats have had since the very foundation has been disproportionately affecting African Americans or minorities within this country. We haven't talked about anything on the Republican side. Like, once again, we've talked about the expediency that we need to do stuff, but that's debatable. So my thing is, man, I guess my last question one more time, man, is why are you saying the part, like, besides the whole party switch, what is big? I guess, let me take this back. As a Democrat, if someone wants to ask you, why do you believe the Democrat Party is more for minorities than Republicans? What would you say?
Because in my opinion, the policies that the Democratic Party is trying to enact is really trying to help African Americans. You may disagree with the premise of big government based off of past history or whatever it may be. But today, I think that you need policies such as increasing funding for Black colleges, housing equality, increasing the minimum wage a little bit. I'm not saying $15. That's idiocy, right? But these policies, universal health care, that's a huge thing. Free college for people making below a certain income level, free public college, free college tuition to public colleges. Cool. These policies are really helping that. Yeah.
All right, so I get that. So the typical stuff, right? So I'm pointing out. So affirmative action has negatively impacted the Black community, right? It was put in place. It was big government policy put in place to have minorities. Didn't work. All the food stamp welfare expanded. Didn't help the Black community. On top of that, we have a Democratic candidate right now who just said that, you know, if you don't vote Democrat, that you ain't Black. So can you tell me on that a little bit? Like, you don't hear Trump saying, you don't hear Republicans discrediting us based upon our race and our policies, but you have white liberals and Democrats alike.
All right.
Okay.
Shashaank, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement. Use it how you want, but you will not be getting any additional time.
Okay, sure. Okay, so for the phrase "you ain't Black," that's commonly used in the show The Breakfast Club. So they said stuff like, if you don't listen to Tupac, then you ain't Black. Stuff like that. So Joe Biden was trying to like make a joke alluding to that. Obviously, I said it was inappropriate in one of my TikTok videos, but that's different. Donald Trump has denied housing and has been sued for denying housing to African Americans in the 1970s. But
what was the conclusion on that case?
he was sued for it, and he admitted to it. He said, "I don't
No,
want welfare."
there was no admittance to discriminating against black.
Okay, but regarding the party switch,
Okay,
I'm not saying that today the Republicans are the party of racism. I would say that more racists today are Republican, but the general beliefs of the party are trying to help everyone, just as the Democrats are trying to help everyone. But and they don't necessarily conform to the beliefs of those racist individuals. But if we want to look at the switch in beliefs, the Democrats started as a party of small government, and the Republicans started as a policy of a party of big government. That shifted completely between the 1860s and the 1930s, primarily because of William Jennings Bryan advocating for bigger government in the turn of the 20th century because of that Western state being added, and the Democrats wanted to appeal to Western voters and try to get those voters by increasing federal expansion, and then FDR cemented it with a New Deal with the sweeping social policies. So that's the sort of the economic shift. But the social shift really came in the 1960s around the Civil Rights Act, and those 40 years. Southern strategy is a proven thing. They were appealing to these different emotions in Southern voters, whether it was about feminism, whether it was about Christianity, whether it was about racism, whatever it was. They got Southern voters to vote for the Republican Party, and not much about the Southern demographic really changed. They just started voting Republican because they conform more to those beliefs. And the South was always known as being the region of racism, the region of conservative values, and they started voting Republican.
Highest hate crime. Okay.
Time. Man, y'all could have went on for another hour. Y'all could have went on for another hour, man. But so what did y'all think, man? Did y'all have a good time?
Yeah, man.
It was good,
it was good. I mean, I like having good discussions, and of course, you came highly recommended, Shashaank. So it's good that you're out there, man, and keep doing your thing. Like real talk, keep doing your thing, keep studying. But I guess this will be another conversation we can have one day. Just how what you think is very beneficial for African Americans is not really beneficial for African Americans.
That could be another topic. That could be a new topic.
Okay. On a much more I'm much more of a moderate Democrat. I don't like the idea of things like reparations and stuff like that. And I do agree that the Black community in general needs to stop just waiting for Democrats to give them all these social programs to try to get themselves out of the position that they're in. A lot of it does have to do with the decisions that they are making, and they need to take responsibility for those. I agree with that premise.
Okay. We'll talk about this after. We'll talk about this after. Let's wrap this first. That might be that might be some after show stuff, right? Okay. So anyway, Toph, where can people find you online, man, if they want to keep watching what you or listening to what you have to say?
Yeah, find me on TopherTown.com. Got all my links there. But also you can find me at TopherTownMusic on any platform, whether it's TikTok, which is my biggest. Then you got Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, SoundCloud. You can find my music on there as well. But yeah, find me all over the place.
Bet. Shashaank, where can people find you, man?
Okay, you can find me at Shashaank Videos on TikTok.
Okay, that was okay.
The main content supply.
All right, bet. So, what about you guys listening at home? Who do you think had the better arguments? Remember that you can vote on who you think won on our Instagram page at 40 Minute Debates. But the poll is only open for 24 hours, so make sure that you do vote quickly. And if you enjoyed this debate and you want to hear more, then make sure you follow us on IG, subscribe to us on YouTube, and until next time.